A seemingly routine flight took a startling turn when a single rash decision shattered the calm. In first class, a high-ranking flight attendant, Eleanor Park, impulsively struck a reserved veteran passenger, igniting a chain reaction that would challenge the very essence of authority. In an instant, the orderly cabin became a battleground of silent power plays and raw emotion. One determined man's unyielding resolve exposed the hidden cost of pride and prejudice, leaving an indelible mark on everyone aboard. Among the murmurs and shocked glances, the veteran passenger, Richard Hale, maintained a quiet dignity that hinted at secrets beyond his modest exterior. His influence ran deeper than anyone expected. His steady gaze and measured silence became the focal point of a confrontation that escalated beyond a mere seating dispute. As tensions mounted and the weight of unspoken truths filled the air, every heartbeat in the cabin echoed the inevitable collision of authority and accountability. One fateful moment challenged the norms of power and respect, leaving everyone to wonder how a single mistake could unravel an entire career and why. In the end, true control lay not in dominance, but in humility. Eleanor had always prided herself on a flawless record, a reputation carved from strict adherence to rules and an unwavering belief in her own authority. Yet on that fateful day, as the sleek cabin of the aircraft buzzed with quiet efficiency, a single decision unraveled years of self-assured dominance. When Richard, dignified yet unassuming, presented a boarding pass that challenged her rigid protocols, her carefully maintained composure faltered. It was a moment that would redefine her entire existence. Eleanor's well-practiced control gave way to impulsiveness, setting off a cascade of events none aboard could have foreseen. As she glowered at the man's calm insistence that he belonged in the premium section, a storm of emotions brewed inside her. "I'm not here to debate your entitlement," she snapped, her voice brittle and determined. Each word carried the weight of a lifetime spent enforcing order, a burden she had never questioned until now. In her mind, the rules were sacred. Any deviation was a threat, not only to her authority, but to the sanctity of the system she so fervently protected. With a trembling hand, driven by a mixture of indignation and fear of losing control, she reached out. In a flash of regrettable haste, she struck him. The sound of that blow echoed in the silent pause that followed, slicing through the tranquil hum of the cabin. The man's impassive expression in the aftermath was more damning than any reprimand could be. His eyes, deep with unspoken history, seemed to say without a word that his quiet dignity was unbreakable. At that moment, Eleanor felt the first prickling of remorse. Around her, passengers exchanged incredulous looks, their murmurs punctuating the charged air. What had once been a display of authoritative assurance was now a raw exposure of vulnerability. Barely concealing her inner tumult, Eleanor tried to maintain her facade as she was summoned to the cockpit. Each step down the narrow aisle was a descent into a personal abyss, a relentless internal monologue questioning every decision that had brought her to this juncture. Was it worth it? She silently wondered, the memory of the strike haunting her with every heartbeat. Her internal dialogue was a cacophony of regret and defiance. The momentary rush of asserting dominance had been replaced by the heavy realization that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was as frigid as the unyielding stares that met her arrival. A senior executive, his presence radiating unassailable authority, fixed her with a gaze that seemed to strip away all pretense. "Explain yourself," he demanded, his tone measured yet unrelenting. The room fell into a suffocating silence, leaving Eleanor to grapple with the gravity of her actions. I believed I was enforcing our standards," she stammered, her voice trembling with the weight of her own inadequacy. Her admission, half-formed and desperate, only deepened the disillusionment evident in the eyes around her. Before any further explanation could soothe the tension, Richard spoke with a calm clarity that resonated like a verdict. Had no one witnessed your transgression, would you have owned up to your error? His question was not posed in anger, but as a pointed inquiry that revealed the hollowness of her conviction. Each syllable sliced through her defenses, forcing her to confront the realization that her sense of superiority was a fragile construct built on the denial of her own imperfections. The meeting morphed into an unyielding inquiry, each moment a small climax in the unraveling of her carefully curated persona. With every new piece of evidence and every unsparing word from the legal advisor, Eleanor's inner fortitude crumbled further. She was no longer the steadfast enforcer of order. She was a woman caught in the merciless grip of her own hubris. You acted out of arrogance, not concern, the executive continued, his voice as cold as the steel that bound her fate. Your action endangered not only our reputation, but the integrity of our entire operation. As the formal review progressed, a profound internal metamorphosis began to take root. In the midst of stern admonishments and the relentless recitation of corporate policy, Eleanor's mind drifted to the countless times she had justified her severity as necessary. Now, the facade of unassailable strength cracked, revealing the fragile humanity beneath. The corridor outside the meeting room became a crucible where memories and regrets coalesced, each recollection a stark reminder of every occasion she had dismissed the feelings of others, every instance where she had wielded power without compassion. Later that evening, alone in the sterile quiet of an unused office, Eleanor allowed herself the luxury of introspection. She stared at her reflection in a dull metal surface, scarcely recognizing the woman before her. A figure once so assured, now visibly diminished by the burden of her misdeeds. Tears, unbidden and bitter, traced silent paths down her cheeks. In that private moment, she acknowledged the profound truth. The very control she had so fiercely clung to was an illusion, a brittle shield that crumbled under the weight of unexamined pride. Over the ensuing hours, as the legal team finalized the inevitable outcomes, her mind replayed the fateful encounter in relentless detail. The dialogue, the flash of her hand, the calm, unyielding expression of the gentleman, all coalesced into a singular narrative of regret and inevitable change. I must learn from this, she whispered to herself, the words barely audible over the steady hum of the fluorescent lights. There was no escaping the finality of her professional downfall. Yet within that finality lay a reluctant invitation to rebuild, a chance to redefine herself away from the toxic grip of authority. Even as the company's decision was formally communicated, her termination irrevocable and her future in aviation now a closed chapter, Eleanor clung to a fragile hope. In the solitude of her personal reflections, she resolved to unearth the lessons hidden in her disgrace. Perhaps the collapse of her former identity could serve as the crucible for a more genuine and compassionate self. In accepting her flaws, she might someday find the strength to forgive herself and rebuild what had been lost. The aftermath of that turbulent flight left an indelible mark on every soul present, none more so than Eleanor's. Her descent from a position of unyielding control to one of profound introspection was a stark, painful reminder that the truest measure of authority lies not in the power to command, but in the humility to acknowledge one's errors. Her journey, fraught with the small climaxes of regret, confrontation, and eventual acceptance, became a poignant tale of transformation, a narrative of collapse and rebirth, where the ruins of old certainties might, in time, give way to a more honest, resilient self.